Jason Jones from the Vulnerable People Project is on the team today. Let's talk about the forever wars and the impact of the U.S. election.
I was almost a never Trumper. I was really not happy with this guy. But this is a man, has he been the only political leader that's been consistently calling for peace? Trump came out this week and said every Armenian Christian shall be returned to Artsakh if he's president of the United States. And more importantly than even voting though, why is it that Catholics in the West, why were we silent when ISIS ethnically cleansed the first century Christian communities of Iraq? It's not a heresy, it's really just a total rejection of Jesus Christ because it didn't.
By the way, my name is Joe McClain. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Certain people get very wealthy when we're always at war, especially in the Middle East, fanning the flame of the forever wars. It's something I've been talking about a long time. When I cast my vote, does my vote get to change how the CIA operates in Yemen, for instance, or hundreds of countries around the world? It doesn't seem so. It doesn't seem like my vote has much to do with that. But I will say this, as critical as I have been of Donald Trump many times, I got to say his foreign war policy is probably better than, I don't know, the last 5 administrations. I mean, he just seemed like he had a different take on the forever war, and I appreciated that. Here to talk about that and several articles that I'm going to be linking for you today is Jason Jones. He's also the author of The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset, and he's the guy behind ceasefirenow.org. He joins us this morning. Jason, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good to see you, brother.
Praise be to God. It's good to see you. Now you're on the stump. Is that true? Are you in PA?
Yeah, I'm actually in Pennsylvania. I'm at a beautiful boutique hotel. I'm here working with the Middle Eastern Christian community. There's 200,000 Lebanese Christians, Syrian Christians, and Armenian Christians in Pennsylvania. And it looks like they're going to deliver Trump Pennsylvania, which is going to deliver Trump the election. So it's been a privilege to be here. But I'm in this beautiful boutique hotel. The Wi-Fi is not the best, so I apologize if it's a little mushy.
Well, we're grateful to have you on the team. And it's we were just talking about Pennsylvania. Epic Times says you got to win Erie County in order to win the election. Blue-collar county, it seems, and that's, I would say, in Trump's favor. But Charlie Kirk says you got to have 3 million people showing up tomorrow to the polls in Pennsylvania alone to win. And he doubts whether or not that's possible. You think it is, though?
I do. It's been amazing. I'll tell you something that's beautiful. I work in the Middle East, and so I'm here with Middle Eastern Christian leaders. And of course, a lot of what we're talking to folks about is foreign policy and these forever wars and its impact on the oldest Christian communities in the world, not only in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon, but also in Syria and Iraq, that have suffered horribly in the past 2 decades, but especially under the Kamala Biden administration. But I was at a Syrian grocery store, and this Syrian community goes back, 100 years. Some of the first immigrants began to come building this community. You're talking with the leaders, and you can tell I've been talking a lot, so forgive my voice. And they want to talk foreign policy. But when I'm at this grocery store, and there were immigrants that weren't even citizens yet that have only been here. One lady we talked to has been here a week, and she said she wishes she could vote. She wants to vote for Trump. But what everyone was talking about in this grocery store was inflation and just sort of the standard boilerplate MAGA issues. And I'm here with a good friend of mine that I work with in the Middle East. I said, wow, we're really wonks. Like, it's amazing how Donald Trump really gets the needs of the American people, because at this Syrian grocery store, the moms coming in to grocery shop, the 2 things they wanted to talk about foreign policy and the genocide in Gaza, of course. But they also were talking about inflation and Maha, make America healthy again. It was striking to me how many of these moms, Lebanese moms, Syrian moms, were so excited about this Make America Healthy Again initiative with RFK.
It's probably because they're used to eating much better food than we eat here. We have processed junk food in this country, and their ingredients are all natural over there.
Here's a secret. If you have a Middle Eastern grocery store in your community, go there, because I never saw such beautiful produce in the United States. Yeah, it was like being back in Iraq. It was wonderful.
I want to. Your article over at Crisis Magazine caught my attention last week. The new Passover of the Judeo-Christian West, and this is a great article because I've been very critical of these conflicts with Israel and their neighbors all the time. Now, of course, I'm not on. I don't celebrate in any way, shape, or form the slaughter of innocent people on October the 7th, 2023, in the Al-Aqsa flood massacre. I don't support terrorists wherever they may be found. But is the answer to level a city? Is the appropriate response to murder or to see the deaths of 20,000 people? It seems like we turn a blind eye. Yeah, we turn a blind eye. We turn a blind eye to all what Israel does because they're Israel and we have to support them no matter what. And if you don't, then you're an anti-Semite. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Either what they do is either right or it's wrong. And if it's wrong, then we should call that out. But why don't we do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I think, and through the evangelical world, there are more Christian, quote unquote, Christian Zionists than Jewish Zionists. In fact, the most outspoken and articulate advocates of Israel's war on Gaza are Jews. You can think of people like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein. And the most ardent advocates for the genocide are evangelical Christians because of this, what I think is apostasy. I think Christian Zionism, it's not a heresy. It's really just a total rejection of Jesus Christ because it denies that he is the fulfillment of all of the promises to Abraham, which he is, of course. And it also denies the necessity of Jesus Christ for salvation and a longing for a way around Jesus Christ, which it's just bizarre and it's new and it's strange and it can be forgiven, I guess, until it's used as the basis of advocating for a genocide. So you said my article at Crisis caught your attention. Caught a lot of people's attention. I've never gotten so much heat. And then I submitted another article it's called The Gaza Generation that's coming out today at Crisis Magazine. And the editor was like, we have to go through this again. We just did this a couple days ago. And I thought, wow, I oppose the invasion of Iraq. I oppose the toppling of Assad. I've opposed all of our counterproductive regime change wars. I've watched as the same people get swept away by war propaganda and war enthusiasm time and time and time and time again. But never have I been attacked as much as for criticizing the state of Israel. The state of Israel is pro-abortion. It's wildly pro-LGBT. It was the most aggressive vaccine country in the world. But somehow these evangelicals think the state of Israel, they criticize us for our doctrine of papal infallibility. Well, we criticize the Holy Father much more. You're not allowed to criticize anything the state of Israel does. And I think it's important that you said the state of Israel does not represent the Jewish people. The Zionists would have you believe that to criticize the state of Israel is anti-Semitic. And that's foolish. And it's also dangerous because to me, that rhetoric actually foments anti-Semitism. If you say that Jewish people are responsible for what the state of Israel does, is actually anti-Semitic. But Joe, I'm glad you've had me on because I know our website's GazaChristians.com. And there are people watching this show right now that consume a lot of evangelical media. They read Jonathan Cahn, they watch Pastor Hagee, they've watched televangelists for decades. And these televangelists have been promulgating this heresy, this apostasy that's now being used to destroy the oldest Christian community in the world. And I have Catholics, I get phone calls from influential Catholics telling me to lay off the state of Israel, when what I'm doing is defending the Christians of Gaza. Go to GazaChristians.com and you can see the relentless war crimes committed by the state of Israel against the Christian community of Gaza and now Lebanon. In the past week, they've bombed multiple churches in Lebanon. They have bombed every Catholic school, every Catholic church, every Catholic hospital in Gaza. There have been brutal attacks like the direct sniper attack on two Catholic women walking out of their church in Gaza. They were shot by snipers for no reason, a mother, an elderly woman and her daughter. And then when men came to rescue her, they were shot at. And there's been attack after attack. The Christian community of northern Gaza is starving to death. Our organization, the Vulnerable People Project, we have not been able to get in trucks in 2 months In fact, the logistics manager, this company we hired, the logistics manager was killed 2 weeks ago trying to deliver food into northern Gaza. But what happens is that these Catholics that consume Protestant media, they've absorbed this heresy, this apostasy of Christian Zionism, and they use it to muzzle themselves. They've used it to muzzle themselves. And I'm going to say this. Yes, of course, the state of Israel they didn't have the right to protect themselves from the brutal attack on October 7th. They actually had the duty. It's the duty of the state of Israel to protect its people.
Amen.
They failed miserably on October 7th, the same way our intelligence agencies failed miserably on September 11th. But what happened? We had the world behind us when we invaded Afghanistan. The war with Iraq, we lost the world. Israel has lost the world, not because they went to defend themselves. They had our back. We had their back. The first thing my organization did on October 7th, that day, we greenlit through a program we have to protect Catholic churches from Islamist extremism. We greenlit putting cameras and hiring security guards for synagogues in Africa that are exposed to the same Islamist extremism the Catholics are. The world was behind Israel's back. But when they began to behave in such a reckless and brutal way within weeks of the invasion, we started scratching our head. Look at how we responded to 9/11. Is the world safer? Is America safer? We have the Taliban. We gave $88 billion of weapons to the Taliban. We saw the rise of ISIS and the ethnic cleansing of the Christians of Iraq. Now Al-Qaeda operates freely across Afghanistan. The world, we undermine our own national security with trillions of dollars and thousands and tens of thousands of American wounded, and then thousands of KIA. So we undermine our own interests. Israel is undermining its own interests. And I hate to, but the people, the Palestinians, the nature of my work, Joe, is I fall in love with these people. I work with these communities. I have Israeli friends who I care with. In fact, my next podcast, I just interviewed an IDF soldier who just left Gaza. He's a hard right Zionist, and I've been a big critic of Israel, and I wanted a different perspective. We share a very close friend, someone I think one of the most beautiful men I know is his close friend. I have dear friends and people who work with me who are Christians from Gaza. In fact, a young man we work with, Khalil, his sister was killed by the IDF. She's 18 years old. His father was killed.
Wow.
His mother was wounded. His other sister was wounded. His church was bombed. His cousins were killed and wounded. And the Palestinian people and the Israeli people have been ambushed by history. If you're born into that region, the people who live there in that region, whether you live in Gaza or the West Bank or Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, you've been ambushed by history. You were born into a land littered with landmines that history left for you. And I don't want to weaponize history, but the Palestinian people, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims that live there, they're going to sink or sail together. We need policies that promote the common good of everyone who lives there.
Amen. If the polls are correct, and who knows if we can trust the polls, they're saying Kamala's going to win, or neck and neck now, and she's ahead in Iowa, for crying out loud. So if she were to win, what does the next 4 years look like for the people, whether they're in Gaza, Palestine, in Afghanistan, Iraq, or anywhere in the Middle East, let alone the rest of the world?
Yeah, well, it's going to be catastrophic. And look, I know this election is very meaningful to all of us. I make a solid middle-class living. I have 7 children and 3 grandchildren, but I'm sort of clueless. I go to the grocery store. I don't know how much anything costs.
Right.
But over the past 3 years, I've definitely noticed the price of things. And my wife says, when my husband notices inflation, we're in real trouble. And it's been really hard on my family. We've had to tighten our belt. We have activities with our children we've had to limit. And we're a middle-class family. And I can't imagine, my mother had me at 16, was a waitress, and I think about how young single mothers and families are even surviving Biden inflation, Kamala inflation. But I run a Catholic apostolate, and our mission is to serve the persecuted church and the most vulnerable people in the world. And I can tell you the past 4 years have been brutal, devastating. We've lost two people that have worked for us in the past 12 months. 16 months. We lost a young man in Sudan who was rescuing rescuing some Catholic nuns from Khartoum as it collapsed into civil war. We just lost a logistics manager who was delivering food into Gaza. We're going to have 1 million dead in Sudan.
I'm so sorry.
because of the civil war. We see hell on earth in Gaza and Lebanon, and we've had 1 million casualties in Ukraine. Do you know what's so interesting about Trump? I don't know if you remember this, Joe. I was campaigning for Ted Cruz in 2016. I was almost a never Trumper. I was really not happy with this guy. I thought he was just a New York liberal. I didn't trust him. I was skeptical. And then, I work in Iraq, and the Trump administration was a great blessing to us. We saw the end of ISIS in Iraq. We saw the liberation of the Yazidi women. A large percentage of them were liberated. Many have been lost. But we saw, the end of ISIS. We saw no new wars. And the Biden-Kamala administration, it's just been war after war after war, genocide after genocide after genocide. And my heart really breaks. I gave a speech the week after Biden-Kamala won last election cycle, in which I laid out all of the horrors that I saw coming. I saw that we would turn away from demanding China free the 3 million Uyghur slaves that the Trump administration was demanding and had labeled it genocide. I saw a collapse in Afghanistan. And I felt when I gave this speech that it was unjust, maybe. I felt a little guilty. Was that just hyperbole? How could I really expect all of these horrible things to happen? And it's been 10 times worse than I imagined at the time. And so it's going to be devastating to the Christian communities. But here's what's amazing about Trump. Some guy that a lot of us, with the conservative temperament, and you see his tweets, it's a little shocking. But this is a man, has he been the only political leader that's been consistently calling for peace? I mean, going back to opposing the Iraq war. And I watch the same people. They get swept away by each new war enthusiasm. They were swept away by the invasion of Iraq, even though St. John Paul the Great pled with America not to do it. Trump was one of the few loud voices in America opposing the invasion of Iraq, and he was right. And he is the only political leader that's had the courage to express thoughtfulness and concern for the civilians in Gaza. In fact, it's funny, Joe, you can imagine the kind of heat I get as a conservative Christian active in the American right for advocating for the Palestinian civilians that are being slaughtered in Israel's genocide. But it's just fun to watch how they have to respond. In the past 48 hours, Trump has twice called for a ceasefire in Gaza, which is just really amazing. You have to understand the political pressure he's under not to make statements like that. And then he went even further. Last September, and people who listened to me when I came on your show last year may remember this. Most Americans don't even know this happened. Last September in Artsakh, an Armenian enclave, Azerbaijan, armed and funded by Israel, ethnically cleansed one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. 120,000 communities ethnically cleansed. Trump came out this week and said every Armenian Christian shall be returned to Artsakh if he's president of the United States. He will see that they're returned, that their churches are rebuilt. Azerbaijan was blowing up churches that go back to the 2nd and 3rd century. Israel bombed the second oldest church in the world in Gaza, church planted by Saint.
We're going to run out of time here. Let me ask you. Let me just ask you this real quick, because we're going to run out of time here real quick. If Trump wins, it seems like the state of Israel, the government in Israel under Benjamin Netanyahu, does not want a two-state solution. They're pushing their settlements even further and further and further out. They are ramping up pressure on Christians who live in Israel. So there's a lot of reports that go underreported in the United States as a result of that. Can Trump pull them back from that? It seems like they want to level Gaza, possibly to extend their boundaries. Do you think he can pull them back from that?
Trump will pull them back. Oh, he will pull them back. We have been funding this war. 75% of this war has been funded by the United States. In fact, we've now hired researchers where we're going in and looking at what IDF military units committed the atrocities against Christians, which weapon systems were used, which American manufacturers manufacture those weapons, and where did the money come from? We're going to do an autopsy. We're going to break down every attack, whether it was the direct rocket attack on the Missionaries of Charity's home for the unwanted and discarded, the elderly, the mentally, cognitively disabled, there was a rocket attack by the IDF. They've bombed every church, every school, every hospital. And then the reflexive answer for the indoctrinated is, well, there's a Hamas tunnel there, or they were using human shields. Show me the evidence of this. There's no evidence of this. Just like the 40 decapitated babies that everyone fell for. I fell for it. In fact, at the time, a Palestinian leader, or a journalist actually, who's communicating with Hamas, called me that day and said, there's no babies. It's a lie. It turned out to be there were 2 children. One was shot through the door by Hamas that was killed. Tragedy, repulsive, horrible terrorist attack. And another was injured by Israeli response, and it's tragic. But people still are throwing around the 40 decapitated babies. It's just not true. But then when you say that there are 19,000, 20,000 dead Palestinian children, we can just yada, yada, yada that, whatever that, and we're funding that. Here's the reality. You ask, we all need to vote. Everyone needs to vote. And more importantly than even voting, though, and I don't understand this, Joe, and I thank you for having me on. Why is it that Catholics in the West, why were we silent when ISIS ethnically cleansed the first century Christian communities of Iraq, planted by St. Thomas himself? Why is the Western Church silent today when in India, in one state alone, in India last year, 280 churches were destroyed? Do you know the Christian, you know this, the Christian community in India goes back to the first century with St. Thomas himself. We need to amplify our voice for the Christians in Gaza and all civilians in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Artsakh, in India, in Ethiopia, in Sudan. This is my responsibility. Fulton Sheen said the foundation of solidarity in the world is love for Christians in one part of the world, for Christians in the other part of the world.
Well said. Well said. Jason Jones, really grateful for your time this morning. Thank you for jumping on with us. Ceasefirenow.org is the website we want you to check out and spread around today. Ceasefirenow.org.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.